Let freedom ring this afternoon at 2 with Sean Hannity. Right before Joe Walsh at 5 on AM 560. The Answer.
Good morning, Dan, and in for Amy this morning, Kristen McQuarrie of the Chicago Tribune editorial board, and President Trump in Poland yesterday offering a speech that got very good reviews, including from Peggy Noonan, who knows something about good speech writing and writing for a great speech giver. Donald Trump yesterday in Poland talking very eloquently about the ties that bind the West, America, and our Polish allies.
Just as Poland could not be broken, I declare today for the world to hear that the West will never, ever be broken. Our values will prevail. Our people will thrive. And our civilization will triumph.
And the Polish crowd chanting USA, USA, USA during parts of President Trump's speech. Now, here back at home in Chicago, over the weekend, we had the Islamic Society of North America conference featuring anti-Semite hate-monger Linda Sarsour as one of the speakers. And while Trump was talking about protecting Western civilization through collaboration with allies across the globe, Linda Sarsour was talking about something quite different.
And I hope that when we stand up to those who oppress our communities, that Allah accepts from us that as a form of jihad, that we are struggling against tyrants and rulers, not only abroad in the Middle East or in the other side of the world, but here in these United States of America, where you have fascists and white supremacists and Islamophobes reigning in the White House.
So the declaration of jihad against the fascists and the white supremacists and the Islamophobes in the White House, and that certainly would include President Trump, according to Sarsour, no question about that. And she made that quite clear. So on one hand, you have Trump and indicating that America first isn't America alone. On the other hand, back domestically, you have the left in all of its incarnations. That's one incarnation. She's also someone that's organized these man-hating shrew marches featuring the mindless ramblings of an Ashley Judd. And Jim Acosta, representing the mentality of the D.C. press corps and the culture at CNN that we've seen on display thanks to the Project Veritas videos this week, how the employees there believe that Trump is effing crazy and that the American voter, meaning the Trump voter, is stupid as blank. Jim Acosta, his review, not of Trump's speech, but of his shot across the bow yet again of CNN.
The president once again said that Barack Obama did nothing from August to November about Russian meddling. That is simply fake news. President Obama talked to Vladimir Putin at a G20 summit in September about all of this. To say otherwise is simply fake news. Barack Obama went farther, by the way, in that meeting with Vladimir Putin than President Trump is promising to do himself. He's not even promising to bring up election meddling in his bilateral with Vladimir Putin. So for the president to say, well, Barack Obama did nothing, he is at this point promising to do less than nothing on that front. The other thing that was fake news coming from President Trump is when he said, well, I keep hearing it's 17 intelligence agencies that say Russia meddled in the election. I think it's only 3 or 4. Where does that number come from? Where is this 3 or 4 number come from? My suspicion, Chris and Poppy, is that if we go to the administration and ask them for this question, I'm not so sure we're going to get an answer. And if we do get an answer, it'll probably be off camera.
Isn't it difficult to say take someone seriously named Poppy? So Acosta, the 2 points he makes, they're alleged fake news. Well, let's see. If Obama did more to stop Russia meddling in the election, then why have we spent the last 8 months talking about how Russia hacked the election? Mm-hmm. Which is it? He was effective in dealing with Putin, or he wasn't, as Democrats like Adam Schiff have criticized the president for not being. And thus Russia hacked the election, and we have to continue obsessing about this alleged Russian conspiracy with the Trump team. Acosta, you can't have it both ways, can you?
I mean, he's not supposed to be weighing in to the extent that he is anyway. He is clearly thinks the Trump administration is abhorrent. It comes through on all of his reporting. That's why you've seen such a backlash from people who, trusted CNN source. No, and he's wrong about the federal agencies. Now, are we going to see a correction? Do broadcast outlets actually follow up and correct the record? Not usually. Well, because he was wrong about that, and Trump was right. It was 3-4, and that's been fact checked.
Yeah, and AP and New York Times have both issued corrections on the topic. So where does he get the number, Mr. Acosta? Maybe Poppy could tell you that he gets the number from the corrections that were issued a couple of weeks ago by the Associated Press. You've heard of them. And the New York Times. I'm glad we could clear that up for Jimmy Boy. For more on these topics, we're pleased to be joined by our friend Steve Cortes, a Fox News contributor and former head of Donald Trump's Hispanic Advisory Council. Steve, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
You bet. Good morning, Dan and Kristen.
So what about Trump's initial offering in Poland and then moving on to Hamburg for the G20 and this all-important meeting with Putin? What do you hope he gets from this trip generally and from Putin specifically?
Sure, you bet. If I may, though, just quickly preface regarding CNN, because I'm glad that you talked about Jim Acosta. He is allegedly a reporter. He's supposed to be covering the White House. He's not a pundit. I'm a pundit on Fox News. I am biased, and I am as transparent about that as could be. I'm a Trump partisan. Doesn't mean I always back him, but I normally do. I'm supposed to have a strong opinion and voice it on air. Acosta is allegedly a journalist, and he rarely acts like one. So I just want to point out that duplicity.
Yeah, I reject that allegation. Yes.
But getting back to your question, because I do think this is really important, the second overseas trip for the president. He gave a rousing speech yesterday in Warsaw. I thought it was incredibly inspiring. I think Peggy Noonan called it Reagan-esque, and I think it was. What we have seen in recent decades in our country, really since Reagan, is the elites of politics, of media, of academia, constantly demean and apologize for Western civilization. And what Donald Trump did, in the way I think only he can in this day and age, is he went there and he spoke plainly and forcefully in defense of Western civilization, which, as he pointed out in historical context, everywhere it is believed in, it results in the flourishing of humankind and prosperity. Everywhere competing ideologies, for example, the one that Ms. Sarsour wants to see instituted in America, anywhere those ideologies are practiced, we see depravity and oppression. So I'm so glad that he, and I hope young people were listening to him and heard his stirring rendition and his really marching orders to, again, defend in every way. Sometimes that's defend in a literal sense on the battlefield. Most of the time it's more about ideas and policies and politics. He's not going to be nearly as welcomed, I suspect, or hasn't been so far in Germany. But here's, I think, the important thing for the meeting with Putin. I'm not naive at all, and I don't think President Trump is, that Putin is our bestie. I don't think we're going to be exchanging Christmas cards with Vladimir Putin. But there are areas where we can cooperate, most of all radical Islamic terror and ISIS. So I think we focus on areas where we can cooperate and be very forceful where they are antagonistic to us. For example, if these reports are correct, that they are hacking and tampering with our nuclear facilities, with our nuclear power facilities, that's a massive issue. And I suspect Trump will bring that up in a very, very forceful way with Vladimir today.
What do you think of, I know that I don't want to focus on optics over substance, but the optics will be important. And he is Putin is great at lying. He smiles through his lies. I thought he kind of wiped the floor with Megyn Kelly during their sit down. What does Trump need to do? I've heard he only has like one sheet of a few talking points so that he doesn't go off message. Yesterday was a big day for Trump. Today might be bigger. What does he need to do to keep this on track?
Right. It's a great question, and my suspicion is what we're going to see is he's going to tell us after the bilateral meeting, that here's where we think we can agree, and here's how we can cooperate. Here's where I was forceful, and perhaps it is the nuclear issue. Perhaps it's election tampering. Perhaps it's supporting Iran. By the way, he was extremely forceful in Warsaw, a few hundred miles away from Moscow. He spoke very directly not just about Western civilization, but also warning Russia that you need to, if you want to become part of the community of responsible nations, I think that was the phrase he used, you need to stop supporting rogue states who wish us harm and wish the Western world harm, like Iran, like Syria. Stop meddling in the Ukraine. So strong words. I guess what I would like to see most today is him to tell us how will he back those words, because Russia, like most dictatorships, generally only responds to threats and at least the possibility of real actions, not just cajoling and persuasion. So my guess would be what he'll say is sanctions can get tougher if they need to. We don't want to go that route. We want to cooperate with you on ISIS, but if you're hacking our nuclear plants, if you continue to support Iran, you may become more isolated in the international community, which is something that they can't afford financially.
Yeah, and he can leaven the conversation with the kind of back and forth exchanging Megyn Kelly stories too, I think, to just kind of mix it up. So let's switch to the domestic front, because ultimately his success or failure with his domestic policy agenda is going to spell the future for both the president and the Republican Party. And I got to say, the Republican Party on the Hill starting to kind of feel a little bit like the Republican Party in Illinois, where you've got an internal problem of a segment of the party that wants to be co-opted by the other side, that wants to surrender to the other side. The only difference is they're surrendering from the majority position, which makes it that much worse. And I speak specifically of the resistance to Medicaid reform as part of Obamacare replace, and Mitch McConnell now suggesting that they may have to work with Democrats and compromise on things like the Medicaid expansion under Obamacare in order to get a replace out of the Senate.
Right. No, sadly, Dan, I couldn't agree with you more. The Republicans on the Hill don't realize if this were a poker match, I mean, they're holding a straight flush, right? I mean, the American people gave them those cards and entrusted them with those cards, but they play their hand like they have a pair of eights. And it's ridiculous. I think some of it is just incompetence. I hope it's not a more nefarious wish to maintain the status quo, but I suspect it might be. I think a lot of Republicans on the Hill like Washington the way it is. They wouldn't say that publicly, but I think privately, in their inner thoughts, and certainly they're showing some of that in their actions. The Americans, they gave us the keys to the car, and we haven't gotten it out of the garage on the Hill. We've got to get this car into gear and out on the highway. And if we don't, by the way, I think the consequences in 2018 electorally could be dire, and they should be at that point. Now, having said that, I am optimistic. It's really ugly to watch. It's frustrating. But I'm optimistic that they are going to come kicking and screaming along, that they will understand that the Trump electoral insurgency was just that. And we're not looking for small changes. We're not looking for tinkering around the edges. The American people are demanding a wholesale usurpation of the political order of the crony capitalist system that Washington has created for its own benefit, to the detriment of most of America. So I'm confident we're going to get there, but the process sure is frustrating. They shouldn't have taken a break for 4th of July, or they should have taken a day. And if they don't get this done and they take a break for August, I think that would be an outrage, and I will be the first one saying all of those Republicans should be ashamed.
He is Steve Cortes, Fox News contributor, former Trump Hispanic Advisory Council head. Steve, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And he joined us on the Turnkey.pro answer line.
If you're talking about it, Dan and Amy are talking about it. It's Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Sheet metal is a big part of commercial and industrial facilities. Look around your